Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash, Oscillator, Overthruster, Lizardo.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, Watchmen, and we are currently doing Westworld. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. Finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are you reviewing tonight?
Gene, I could not be more pleased that our commissioner this week, Brian L., asked us to go to a place I had never been before. He wanted us to go to the 8th dimension, and I'm very glad that he did, and we will review the 1984 science fiction classic, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
When they wrote in and said, hey, Shat Crew, so here's my thoughts and memories of Buckaroo Banzai. First off, thanks for the work you guys put into this podcast. I came of age in the 80s, and the movies of that decade and the 90s are part of who I am today. I discovered you in the middle of your second season, caught up on the back catalog, and never missed an episode. Eventually, I felt like I needed to step up to support you and went searching around for something that you haven't covered yet. My first thought was Alien, but someone beat me to it by about a week. The next thought, inexplicably, was Buckaroo Banzai. What the hell was I thinking? In my memory, me and all my high school friends are gathered around the VCR to see it and then quoting lines for weeks. Only, that's not true. After a series of Facebook conversations, the best I can piece together is that I saw it in 1985 with my two closest friends. Shout out to Mike and Kelly. 1985 in California. One had moved there from Connecticut a year earlier, and we flew out to visit him. The last time the three of us would be together until my wedding almost a decade later. And unfortunately, we've not all been together since. We must have liked it, as we can still remember it, and many of the lines stick with us to this day. Laugh while you can, monkey boy. Don't pull on that. You don't know what it's connected to. Where are we going? Planet 10? When are we going? Real soon. I just watched it again, though, and I have half a mind to apologize. It's a bizarre movie. Charming in parts, slow in others, weird the whole way through. Christopher Lloyd in a minor role, Jeff Goldblum pre-Jurassic Park, and John Lithgow positively chewing up the scenery. In fact, Lithgow is probably why I remember it. It may be the film's primary redeeming feature, and you can see the comedic talent he'll eventually bring to Third Rock from the Sun. Gloriously over the top. I think at the time when comic book superhero movies were not as ubiquitous as they are today, it was unlike anything we had seen. A movie about a superhuman talent with an apparently complex and idiosyncratic backstory confronting impossible situations with a shrug and a wink. Where did this come from? Did I miss the prequels? And when will the sequel advertised at the end be released? What the fuck did we just watch? Anyway, like it or hate it, I'm looking forward to hearing your take. I'll be happy if we can just agree on Lithgow. The man is a national treasure. Keep the reviews coming. I'm already hunting for better films to commission.
Well, thanks, Brian, for your commission. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, often shortened to Buckaroo Banzai, is a 1984 science fiction film starring Peter Weller, Ellen Barkin, John Lithgow, Jeff Goldblum, and Christopher Lloyd. The film centers upon the efforts of Dr. Buckaroo Banzai, a physicist, neurosurgeon, test pilot, and rock star, to save the world by defeating a band of interdimensional aliens called the Red Lectroids from Planet 10. Box office figures were low, and less than half of the film's production costs were covered. Some critics were put off by the complicated plot. Buckaroo Banzai has been adapted for books, comics, and a video game, and has attracted a loyal cult following.
So, Gene, I don't know about you, but I had never heard of this movie. I Googled Buckaroo Banzai. You know how it autofills like a suggestion box of things? The number one question that people also asked was, is Buckaroo Banzai a real movie?
I'm surprised this wasn't in regular rotation for you with the amount of hallucinogenic drugs you've done, because during my senior year at ASU, I watched a lot of pirated movies on Sunday nights on drugs at friends' houses. That's like what we did. And that's where I first saw Buckaroo Banzai. And I remember at the time, it was like a slightly comedic, but mostly cheesy sci-fi pasta bowl that we mostly laughed at instead of with. More importantly, I didn't recognize many of the faces that later would become some of my favorite actors. Like a lot of the guys that we just mentioned, I had no idea who they were in 1998. I originally wasn't scheduled to do this episode of Shat the Movies, but Big D, you insisted, and I really hope you're not disappointed in my opinion of it.
Yeah, I mean, I had never seen this before. I think I'd heard of it at some point, but not seen it. And when I first read the description, I knew immediately that this was a Gene Lyons type of film. And I am the biggest Jeff Goldblum fan. I adore him. And so when I heard he was in it, that made me even more excited to see it and talk about the craziness of this film with you guys.
Oh, this movie screams Gene Lyons. I could imagine as I was watching it, Gene is sitting there in his home. He has candles on. He's poured himself a glass of wine, and his mind is wandering to which personality. What would his role have been in the Hong Kong Cavaliers? Would he have worn like maybe a military outfit or a top coat or maybe some wild hat or something? I don't know, but this movie fits him. Without Eugene, this review would have been missing something. And you asked why I did not see this film. I had early on been tainted by some non-Monty Python, Terry Gilliam films. So like Brazil or Time Bandits, I saw those covers, tried to watch those movies, got a real bad taste in my mouth. So I associated the cover art. I said, this must be the same type of, through space, wild, bonkered. I never watched it, and I would have missed out on this gem. 37 years I've missed out without Brian. So Brian, thank you very much for exposing this hidden gem in my life.
But dude, the parallels between this and Time Rider, like I would think this would be very high on your list of movies to watch because you're such a Time Rider fan, a movie that I had never heard of.
Yeah, I think it was the cover art had like the ensemble pictures of the cast, and they looked really eccentric, and the outfits didn't seem to go together. So I thought it was going to be some wild plot that was above my head and I wouldn't have gotten and thought it was too artsy, but I couldn't have been more wrong.
Not like the GQ cover shoot on the cover of Time Rider.
Yeah, it's a motorcycle driving through the desert. That piqued my interest as a kid.
All right, well, off to the eighth dimension. Let's hit the trailer.
He's a rocker. Doctor.
Don't tug on that. You never know what it might be attached to.
Inventor.
Activate oscillator.
It's broken the sound barrier.
Philosopher.
No matter where you go, there you are.
And the only hero.
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo.
Buckaroo. Curse you, Banzai!
Who can save us all.
Evil! Pure and simple from the 8th dimension! Venom!
Launch thermal pod.
Buckaroo Banzai is pure nutty fun.
Buckaroo, you forgot your thruster.
Why don't you hold on to him for a while?
The cult sci-fi classic.
Run!
In a dimension all its own.
Real life Martians were landing in New Jersey.
Holy Toledo!
We will fire a portable beam weapon.
Vaporize the whole damn planet?
If we blow this today,
Get him up.
there ain't no tomorrow.
Left! I said left! This is left! I mean my left! Your left! Go your right!
Buckaroo, President's calling about is everything okay with the alien space cloud from Planet 10, or should we just go ahead and destroy Russia?
Tell him yes on one and no on two.
The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Which was yes, destroy Russia or number 2?
Buckaroo Banzai and his mentor, Dr. Hikita, perfect a device that allows an object to pass through solid matter. Banzai tests it by driving his jet car through a mountain. After exiting the mountain and returning to his normal dimension, Banzai discovers an alien organism has attached itself to his car. Incarcerated Dr. Emilio Lizardo sees a television news story of Banzai's successful test. Back in 1938, Doctors Lizardo and Hikita had built a prototype Overthruster, but Lizardo became stuck between dimensions and was attacked by aliens, emerging changed and violent. Lizardo escapes the asylum and plots to steal the Overthruster. So Ash, Big D, you mentioned how this movie really feels like a Gene Lyons movie. I feel a direct kinship with Buckaroo Banzai. When I was a kid, my PE teacher once told me that being in all the gifted programs and acing all my tests didn't mean shit because I was fat and soft and slow. And in his defense, I've always been fat and soft and slow. So I immediately decided that day I wanted to play football. I wanted to be in student council. I wanted to play in the band. I wanted to write poetry. And that extended to having a band and training in martial arts and playing basketball, school newspaper, photography, podcasting. You get the idea. So I have a natural love for Buckaroo Banzai being a polymath. I mean, one second he's doing neurosurgery with Jeff Goldblum while everyone in his band is waiting for him to test a rocket car. How do you not love this guy and this movie right off the bat?
Right. I mean, he's a total definition of a Renaissance man, right? Like from the beginning, your expectations are set really, really high for this film because if you haven't seen it before, like very like a la Star Wars, this whole like yellow text like comes up on the screen with these 3 massive paragraphs setting up the exposition for what you're about to see. And it lets you know that he's born of a Japanese father and an American mother, and he's into martial arts, but he's also into particle physics. And it's the type of like ridiculous amalgam that I think is really hilarious. And I love the idea of who this guy is, like from the absolute start.
But I think it only works with Peter Wellers. He is that everyman. He's not arrogant. He is, what do they say? He's the guy every guy wants to be, or the guy that every woman wants to be with. He's charismatic. He's confident. He's fun. There's not anything to dislike about this guy.
I don't disagree, although I don't know if I would call him like an everyman because he looks like a wax figure. But, you know, I get it. I mean, I get the point. But I don't know if any of you guys have seen Maverick. There's this ridiculous scene in the film where he goes Mach 10 and he breaks like all these records and he survives the plane completely breaking apart, which makes no sense. And here we get Buckaroo Banzai doing the exact same thing, but much cooler than what happens in Maverick because he's in his little car. He's got that glass hood that's like reflecting the desert as he drives through it. He breaks left, which he's not supposed to do, and like nobody's worried about it. And the guy in the booth, he's my favorite part of this whole sequence because he's like, hold still, he'll hold, be cool. You know, like it's not a big deal that this guy's about to try to go through a mountain, but they just trust Buckaroo Banzai is such a cool dude. Like he has it, and he does. Like he breaks straight through the mountain like a badass, comes out the other side. And to be honest, it's more believable that he makes it through that mountain than it is that Maverick survives the Mach 10 trip.
And few movies scale their effects, their budgets as masterfully as Buckaroo Banzai, because the sequence that you just described, most movie makers would try to push that to the limit and it would look awful. This movie was made with 1/3 the budget of Crawl, a movie that we saw. We knew they spent money on it, but it looked terrible. And this movie is so much better. For Buckaroo's rocket car, they didn't even use a car. They used a Ford F-350.
Like yeah.
And they didn't try to hide it. The limited mechanical effects they employed looked great. It was just some hoses, some gyroscopes. You got the idea.
Yeah, the movie looks like it's kind of a ragtag put together thing. And it's okay. But certain the dialogue in the beginning, I started to have flashbacks to Robot Jox. Robot Jox was another one of those movies that the special effects were kind of hokey. The way that the people talked wasn't normal. And this movie, for the beginning especially and throughout, it consists of like buzzwords, esoteric language, and like technobabble. They're trying to act smart and they're trying to be futuristic. And here's an example. So we get Rawhide, great character, and he says, Dr. Banzai is using a laser to vaporize the pineal tumor without damaging the quadrigenyal plate. Subcutaneous microphones are going to allow the patient to transmit verbal instructions to his own brain. Like, you know, raise your left arm, and then Rawhide says, yeah, or throw the harpoon. People are going to come from all over. This boy's an Eskimo. This would not work. This would turn everybody off, including me, if it was not delivered with 100% earnest delivery. The entire cast never once breaks. They never once look at the camera and wink. This is like a movie from a different dimension that we're just dropped into, and everybody buys in.
But it didn't work. That's the problem. I can tell from the start of this movie exactly why Buckaroo Banzai flopped at the box office. Because for those of us who were kids, right, in 1984, we were too young to understand the layers of humor and camp and the illusions being made. And for my mom's generation, who were in their 30s at the time, they wouldn't think this is entertaining at all. There's way too much going on. The jokes are way too niche. And like the fact that they're doing surgery on an Eskimo who needs to have somatic control over his harpoon throwing arm. And then Buckaroo says that famous line that Brian pointed out, don't tug on that. You never know what it's attached to. This movie was filmed in 1984, but it was made for an audience in 2024, or at least a room full of stoners.
I think the biggest example of this is when he's going through the mountain, like the special effects look like shit, but they're really funny. And then randomly this little alien life form like passes by his window and it's all naked and it's in this weird fetal position and it's just like out of nowhere. And in 84, this would have maybe read like as really stupid. And in 2022, though, it's really hilarious. And it made me really excited about what the rest of the film was going to be like.
And what I love about it, Ash, is nobody knows what the fifth dimension looks like, much less the eighth dimension, right?
Yeah.
For all we know, the eighth dimension could just be a bunch of naked aliens in full tuck. Why not roll the dice?
Yeah, and this movie has caused me to change once again my free commission from Steve for winning the football league. I was set on Ice Pirates, but I don't think I can do that because after Buckaroo Banzai, I don't think there's anything can compare to it.
Prince of Tides with your mom.
That's been suggested. If I could do it logistically, I think I might.
Well, Banzai and his band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers, are performing at a nightclub when Banzai dedicates a song to a depressed Penny Pretty. During the song, Penny attempts suicide, which is mistaken for an assassination attempt. Banzai realizes that she is his late wife's long-lost identical twin sister and bails her out of jail. During a press conference, Banzai is called to the phone where he receives an electrical shock. Hikita is kidnapped, and Banzai's electrical shock enables him to recognize the kidnappers as humanoid aliens. He rescues Hikita, and they evade the aliens long enough for the Cavaliers to come rescue them.
So one thing I loathe in 80s films are music interludes, typically, especially if the main character all of a sudden starts playing or singing. And that's why that scene in Anchorman where he plays the jazz flute is so funny, because it completely reads films like what they're about to do here perfectly. But in this movie, I actually really love the club scene because he's playing this badass white guitar. He's looking all sexy. His bassist has that amazing oversized jacket that I would wear like right now while recording. And I'm digging it. Like, it's awesome. And then he pulls out that tiny horn and starts playing it. And I about died laughing because this movie does what a lot of comedies don't. It completely understands its own absurdity and it plays on that absurdity. It's highly aware of that absurdity and it winds up just being incredible.
I was right there with you. I was so worried when the music scene came on. We were off to such a good start, and I was like, oh, shit, here we go. I thought the music would be the gap in this movie's armor. And then you start to notice, like, there's two saxophones for whatever fucking reason. And then that cornet came out, and I was just fucking sold. And I'm so glad music did come in because it got me to thinking of what this movie is. And I realized Buckaroo Banzai is cinematic jazz. In jazz, musicians, they start together with a melody and then they take turns improvising with their respective instruments. And that's exactly what's happening here. We start the movie off with a classic story of an alien invasion, and then each plot line and actor kind of takes turns improvising with some truly weird shit, while all the other supporting cast and storyline, they kind of tone it down momentarily to let that performer do their thing. Like, take Penny, for example. Penny, she's not just Buckaroo's romance in the movie. She's also an oddly suicidal orphan who like slinks around her jail cell and then discovers she's actually Buckaroo's late wife's long lost identical twin sister, whose name he can't even bother to get right. And when she's turning it on and being the most Penny, everybody else kind of gives her space to work and they tone down and they play it straight.
Well, and I'm sorry, but this is one of the best introductions to a character of like any film we've ever reviewed, because Buckaroo Banzai's playing and then like he stops because he hears someone crying, which is ridiculous. And like this super loud club, he calls her out in the middle of the club and she gives that great performance where she's sitting there and she's got that running eyeliner and she's totally overacting, but again, in a way that's completely aware that she's overreacting. It's just perfection.
No, but he's great again. He's up there, he's telling everybody, come on, man. We can only control, let's be nice. We got to be nice to each other. And I'm like, shit, we're getting multiple layers here. And we've done now 280 something movies. And I feel like a fraud. How did I not know this movie existed or the cultural impact or importance of these characters? How did I never know the Hong Kong Cavaliers? If you want to know the impact of this movie, it's been almost 40 years. Do a Google search of Buckaroo Banzai, and you're going to get hundreds of custom t-shirts. Etsy has shit you would not believe that's done from this movie, like props that are made, like little koozies. They have all kinds of knitted sweaters and things for dogs. The memorabilia is crazy, and I never would have known that without getting this commission. But every member of this team, it's a unique, original creation. They are sure they have like little let's just say, homages to other characters we've seen in films, but they're all truly unique. They're genuine. The characters are somebody I could watch a movie with a spinoff of just half the Hong Kong Cavaliers doing whatever they're doing, but it is gold. And I felt like more of a credible podcaster when I have New Jersey, Billy Travelers, Rawhide, Buckaroo, Reno, Pink Carruthers, and Perfect Tommy to fall back on. I can't believe I never knew they existed.
What's wild about all these guys too is like they seem to have like threefold capabilities, much like Buckaroo, right? So they're musicians, but they also are like ass kickers / kind of cowboys. And then they also have like technological abilities, like they can run radar or run, or infiltrate security systems. It's a good team to have.
Yeah, but none of them have like some over the top superpower. Like even when they get New Jersey to join on board, he's not quite sure why he's there. Can you play an instrument? No, but I can sing. And then he shows up in that random cowboy outfit without spurs. As long as you're unique, you can be part of the team. And I think that's just like Shat the movies.
Banzai and the Cavaliers meet with John Parker, a messenger from John Emdahl, the leader of the Black Lectroids of Planet 10. A recording explains that the Black Lectroids had been at war with the hostile Red Lectroids for years, meaning to banish them to the 8th dimension. Lizardo's failed test of the Overthruster in 1938 allowed the Red Lectroid's tyrannical leader, Lord John Whorfin, to take over Lizardo's mind and enable several dozen of his allies to escape. Emdahl fears Whorfin will try to acquire the Overthruster to free the other Red Lectroids and tasks Banzai with stopping Whorfin. If he can't, the Black Lectroids will trigger World War III to annihilate the Red Lectroids on Earth as well as humankind.
So fun fact, I'm really terrified of John Lithgow. I think that he's fucking terrifying. And it's because of the fact that I thought he was the scariest character ever when Dexter was still good. The last season, it was still good. When he played the Trinity Killer. He's so frightening in that. And as such, I typically avoid anything that has him in it. But I had heard he was really funny. And I know he was in that 30 Rock show, but I typically don't watch a lot of like sitcoms, so I've never seen it. And so I had never really experienced John Lithgow's comedy side. And I'm so bummed by that because he's amazing in this movie. When he puts that electrode thing on his tongue and shocks himself, hilarious. His performance at the lab, like the entirety of him like bouncing and being all flouncy trying to get in the car. And then his his head stuck in the wall. He's so funny every scene he's in. And the fact that he's like an actor and like people respect his acting ability, but yet he kills a scene where he's fighting imaginary aliens just beyond the wall. It shows that he's like the most diverse person maybe we've ever had on this podcast that we're reviewing. And then he comes out and he does that scream and then just screams and runs out the room. It is fucking gold.
Yeah, Lithgow's having way too much fun in this movie. He is so gleefully committed to that awful Italian accent. And when he's on like PA systems, he does this thing where after he says stuff, he like recoils away and just kind of takes pleasure in the thing that he just said. All these weird idiosyncrasies that make Lord John Whorfin so much fun to watch. And he didn't have to do any of that. Like I'm certain he could have gotten by with not doing it, but the fact that he did it for us, hats off. And like Brian mentioned, you can absolutely see where John Lithgow took inspiration for his character in Third Rock from the Sun. But he's not alone in that. You throw in Christopher Lloyd, Vincent Scavelli, Dan Hedaya, and you realize that somebody in casting wanted to get basically the most eccentric guys in Hollywood to play these awkward aliens struggling to fit in. And it makes perfect sense to do that. And then they top it off by naming all of them John, because they had to come in 1938 and just come up with names for themselves. So they got John Smallberries, John Yaya, John Gomez, John Many Jars, John O'Connor, John Coyote, and then, of course, Christopher Lloyd, second in command, John Big Booty.
Oh, no, it's Boutte. John Big Boutte.
You're right.
But this cast, you said, is phenomenal. But at the time, I wonder if they were just all unknowns. Today you go back and it seems like every actor or character actor that you love from a show is in it. They have Mike from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He is a youngin'. But every time a scene comes up, and even if it's a little throwaway character in the back, you're like, holy shit, where do I know him from? Where do I know her from? They did a great job of casting people who would have long careers, quality careers. And it was obvious that this project got people to join it, not because it was going to be some big hit. I think it was a quirky project even from the beginning, but they all bought in and they're having fun and it's infectious to the audience and it makes any wart seem not as big.
Well, and the actors aren't the only people having fun. Like the set designers had to have a blast on this movie because one of the weirdest, yet I think really delightful and charming parts of this film is the way they design the spaceships because they make no sense. Like when they give that shot inside like the mothership and those aliens are sitting up on those tables that you have no clue how they got up that high. The chairs are ridiculously incredibly high. The space is just so wide open and wasteful. It's so stupid, but just so visually funny. And the same can be said of like the fact that the spaceship itself is made up of those weird twisty branches. Like I kept like looking at it and going, okay, but like, how does that work? Like, where are the halls? Like, how does this fly? And the little transport pod that comes down that looks like a rolled up roly-poly, like none of it makes sense, but nothing needs to because this movie is so ridiculous. If anything looked too real, it would have like ruined the entire aesthetic and experience of the movie. So the way they do it makes sense, but it's like brilliant in its stupidity.
Totally. The sets and the costumes must have been a blast to construct. I mean, they just put random watermelons in machinery for no reason. And then their outfits, they're like these combinations of athleisure and like disco formal wear. There's a ton to look at in this movie. Your eyes never get tired. The Cavaliers tracked the red Lectroids to Yo-Yo-Dyne propulsion systems in New Jersey. They realized that Orson Welles' broadcast, The War of the Worlds, described the Lectroids' arrival in 1938, though afterward, the Lectroids forced him to state it was fictional. Yo-Yo-Dyne has been building a spacecraft to cross over into the eighth dimension, disguised as a new United States Air Force bomber. While the Cavaliers are planning their response, red Lectroids break into the Institute and kidnap Penny, unaware that they have also captured the Overthruster, which she is carrying. So this movie makes me smile for 100 different reasons, one of which is the optimism of this coalition. It's something we need sorely in 2022. You've got the black Lectroids, who are aliens who appear as eclectically stylish Jamaicans. You've got Sydney, who's a neurosurgeon from New Jersey who just wants to live a cowboy fantasy of being a Hong Kong Cavalier. You got the Secretary of Defense, Japanese scientists. You got a rural mechanic and his son, all joining the fight to defend the Earth. And there's this fantastic scene during the end credits where they all come together and just strut to music. And it just feels so good to see this many different kinds of people come together to defend the Earth.
And I think in this way, it makes this the most accurate comic book movie maybe ever. And I'm not saying I don't love the comic book movies that have come out, because I think the original Marvels, I love the most recent Batman with Robert Pattinson. Like, I think there's some good ones out there, but the majority of them don't capture what like comics actually are or were. And for me, growing up collecting comics, the ones that I really found myself leaning toward all had these eclectic groups that made no sense, but when they gathered together, they did things that also made no sense, but there was some sense found in their actions as a collective unit. And it was really fun to watch all of that absurdity. Comics were really never meant to feel real, which is why I think a lot of people, you know, insult like the really gritty ones, right? But I think they're meant to be an escape. At least a lot of the Marvel. Now, DC is a whole nother beast, right? But a lot of Marvel comics, the more fun ones, the ones that aren't quite so dark, because there are some dark ones. Yes, I know, please don't write in. But the really fun ones, like that this is based on, they're meant to be an escape. And that's what this movie is.
And Gene, I like that earlier you equated the movie to a piece of jazz where everyone takes a turn to go front stage, do a little solo, then step back. And that's great. But in a movie like this, where you have a cast of how many Hong Kong Cavaliers, and then, like you said, scientists and just random characters, you run into a problem. The movie's an hour and 43 minutes, and it can use some trimming. There's a little bit of fat on the bones. And I couldn't help myself but start at this point in the movie, about an hour 30 in, maybe an hour 20 in, to look at my watch. It's when they go into the Yo-Yo-Dyne propulsion system. The plot, it seems to just slow down. We're moving at a fast pace in the beginning. We hit this, and we get into a couple multiple loops of going around the red Lectroid bivouac. And if the only payoff is so that each of the character can confidently say that they know how to incorporate the word bivouac into their vocabulary, this is wasted time that we could have just been moving on and had the movie overall be tighter.
scary stuff because at the same exact point in the movie, I felt the same exact thing. And I said to the movie, like, oh, you were so close to being perfect. Yeah. It was just this weird, sluggish chunk, right? That could have just been trimmed up a little bit and you might have a perfect movie on your hands.
Agreed.
Well, the red electroids torture Penny. Banzai, the Cavaliers, and the Blue Blaze Irregulars, civilians recruited to assist the Cavaliers when necessary, save Penny and fight off the red electroids. Banzai and Parker sneak into a pod on the Yoyodyne spacecraft. Lacking Banzai's Overthruster, the red electroid spaceship breaks through the Yoyodyne wall and takes off into the atmosphere. Lord Whorfin ejects the pod containing Banzai and Parker from the craft, but they manage to use its weapon systems to destroy Whorfin and the other red electroids. Banzai parachutes back to Earth while Parker returns to his people in orbit using the pod. Banzai finds Penny has died from her injuries. When he goes to give her a final kiss, M-Dog gives Banzai another brief shock, thus reviving Penny. Okay, so one of my favorite Hong Kong Cavaliers is Rawhide. You mentioned him before, Big D. He's played by Clancy Brown. He was the Kurgan in The Highlander and Viking in our upcoming coverage of the movie Bad Boys. Not the Will Smith Bad Boys, but the 1983 Bad Boys. Rawhide is arguably Buckaroo's closest peer among the Hong Kong Cavaliers. Earlier in the movie, he gets hit by a red electroid stinker and he dies. And I'm thinking maybe the black electroids at some point would want to tell Buckaroo, hey, you can resurrect people by kissing them. Instead, he uses the power on Penny. And I mean, Penny's cool. She's hot, but she's no Rawhide. Rawhide deserved better.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no reason to believe that he can't just, like, shock again. Like, I assume it's not like a one and done thing. You think he could, like, use his inferential skills and go, you know, kiss Rawhide on the mouth and bring them all back. But I'm with you. I think justice for Rawhide, for sure.
Oh, his death scene got me emotional. When he's going down and everybody's like, he can't feel his legs. In a ridiculous movie, I was like, yes, do something. Save the man. And he had an honorable death. He took it like a champ and said, hey, keep fighting. Justice for Rawhide.
Well, and Gene, you already mentioned the grouping at the end, the ensemble grouping. And I have to say, I love a good credit sequence where we get to see all of our people like just one more time. And this one is so good because you've got them all coming together. They're all excited. They're walking very intentionally with purpose. Some are shirtless, some are in suits. Jeff Goldblum is still a cowboy and giggling like a crazy person. Penny's randomly dressed like a flapper. It just is so damn good. And I wanted so many of their clothes. I forget sometimes how awesome some 80s fashion was. And nothing really had to serve a purpose here. This isn't like your Marvel post-credit scene. This is just them walking. And I feel like the director was like, hey, just like do what you do. And whatever happened, it was cool that it happened. And I'm so glad that this credit scene happened because it was the perfect way to end the film.
As I was watching it, I felt so good inside and I got the nagging feeling it was just reminding me of something. So I looked it up and sure enough, the Life Aquatic pays homage to Buckaroo Banzai in his closing credits. If you watch that last scene when Bill Murray comes across, he's got a little kid with him and then all the characters kind of join in one by one and it's all set to David Bowie. It's absolutely fucking fantastic. If you haven't seen it, watch the two together. And you'll just feel much fucking better afterward.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we get at the end there that famous sequel teaser. And people are going to think, oh, this was like Back to the Future. But Back to the Future, the to be continued, was only added to the VHS release of the first movie, then added to the end of the movie for its subsequent re-releases in theater. It originally wasn't there. To do this and to tease a sequel and not do it is... I'm glad that I watched this movie almost 40 years later because I feel cheated and the 40 years had passed. If I had been a fan of this and had to go through the hopes that we were going to get Buckaroo Banzai against the World Crime League, I would have had my fingers crossed, you know, and in the time that's passed, luckily that I wasn't even a fan or aware that this was around, Hollywood, it didn't pass between studios. It looks like it's dead. Kevin Smith, who's a big fan, had stepped up and said he was going to do some kind of a potential TV series. And, you know, he did something recently with He-Man, a cartoon on Netflix. So he was going to step up. Then legal issues caused him to back out. So looking at the cast today and photos, I don't see any way you could ever bring this back. It would be some real weird thing. I mean, with Top Gun, us seeing, how age has kind of affected everybody except for Tom Cruise, it would be difficult to recapture this magic. But if you are a fan out there, Gene, of the comic books, we got the release this year of the 500-page novel, which was the sequel. So you can get out there and see it. It's been received to lukewarm reviews, but I can't help but feel that we lost something that could have been something great.
I mean, but think of it this way. It's kind of our special something. Like, I hate to be a gatekeeper of Buckaroo Banzai, but if you meet another person who likes Buckaroo Banzai, they're probably going to be a pretty cool person. If you meet another person who likes Top Gun, it's fucking, everybody likes Top Gun. Well, now's the time of the podcast where we give our wipe scores for Buckaroo Banzai. Zero Wipes is a perfect movie. It is honoring the memory of your quantum physicist Japanese father and mathematician / negative mass propulsion expert American mother by becoming the second man to travel to the eighth dimension. 5 Wipes is an absolute disaster. It's arriving on an alien planet only to slip off your roly-poly spacecraft and fatally crack your head open on a rock. I'll go and get the ball rolling. I love John Waters. I love Russ Meyer. I love Crybaby. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Rocky Horror Picture Show. But today I am crowning Buckaroo Banzai the king of campy films. As Brian said, the awful yet quotable lines like, make it the ganglia twitch, or no matter where you go, there you are, or feet, do your stuff, coupled with a celebration of all the cheap reasons why samurai and aliens and rocket cars and rock bands and Italian accents rule, push Buckaroo Banzai into a class all its own. And Peter Weller, whom I previously thought was born to play RoboCop, he is perfect for the role of Buckaroo Banzai. They couldn't have done this movie without him. This is the right movie at the right time. It's half a wipe for me.
So I don't know if I'm calling this like the ultimate king of camp, but I think it's really amazing. I also love John Waters. I think Crybaby, Pink Flamingos, Hairspray are amazing. I think that Buffy and Rocky Horror Picture Show are like masterpieces, like masterclasses in their genres. And so I think those are better. But I do think this movie is up there. It's fun. It's ridiculous, but really well thought out. It's really funny, both intentionally and otherwise. And it's a bonkers idea. Speaking of Buffy, much like naming a show something insane, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, naming a movie Buckaroo Banzai took some balls. And I think it's a payoff. And I think the best people are going to see this movie for what it is, which I think is an absolute classic. I think it is almost perfect. I also think it's 0.5 wipes.
So I think it would be easy to dismiss this as just like 80s cheese, the way I did by viewing just the cover art those many years ago. But you'd be really wrong. Please, if you have not seen this movie, go out, find it, and watch it, because it's more than just cheese. Yeah, there's moments of cheese. You can't deny that. But the biggest draw of the film is that the movie seems to exist in its own world. It's up front, it starts off, and it says, hey, this is the world, catch up. And it treats the audience with respect. It's not talking down to us. I think today it seems a bit kind of out there and artsy, but at the time it was saying, hey, people, sit down, you're smart, enjoy this, just take it for what it is. It is a truly original film. It is very rare to find something like this. And I think especially for the 80s, this is a movie that deserves the cult following that it has gotten. And please, this has got my seal of approval. Go out there and watch this. You will not regret it. So for me, this is a one wipe film.
So with 1 wipe from Big D, half a wipe from Ash, and half a wipe from me, that gives us an average wipe score for The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension of 0.6 repeating wipes.
So Gene, with a score of 0.6 repeating wipes, that now ties this in the 28th spot. Ooh, we're going to get some blowback on this. It is now tied with Die Hard, Groundhog Day, Good Will Hunting, The Fugitive, Interview with a Vampire, Bull Durham, and Titanic.
I got to say, a lot of those movies feel very textbook in comparison, right? Like they feel safe. And I think that this movie took a lot of chances. You mentioned blowback, but the way I look at it, we've also taken criticism from listeners that we only stick to the blockbuster movies, that we only are fans of the things that everybody likes. And this is an underdog movie coming in at 0.6 repeating wipes that I think earns its spot.
For me, a big part is you go to see a movie because it should entertain you. You should feel something. I left this film smiling. I felt good. There's something about this film that is fun. And a lot of the films that we do are heavy and they don't leave you necessarily feeling better than you were. In this movie, once it was done, my day was a little brighter. And it's cheesy to say, but I think it was because the movie was something truly unique I had never seen before.
Well, not to ruin your bright and sunny day, Big D, but we do have some email coming in from listeners, and one of them is coming in real hot.
So I'm a fan of your podcast. I started on the first episode of Shat the Movies, and I totally love it. Having said that, I'm listening to Air Force One, and y'all need to stay away from politics. You sound like a bunch of assholes. Other than that, I think you guys are great. Keep it up. Just not the politics. Respectfully, ciao.
I will say that since we did Air Force One, we've only become more political. So look out, particularly with when Ash and I get going, we get really going. But I think Big D is now squarely in the liberal camp. So yeah, man, I mean, I'm sorry, that's who we are. And it's a weird thing because as we talk about our experiences with film, at least, what invariably is going to come out, especially if it's a movie about a president, we're probably going to share our opinions about the presidency, about politics. That's a part of life, man.
I don't even remember what we said. What did we say? That was obviously it's the president. We probably maybe made jokes about how he was like gung ho and he was out there like trying to lead the charge to take back the plane, and what other presidents would do. Is that what we were talking about?
I mean, I honestly don't recall, but if you had, I think it was me and Roger on a podcast together about a president, I guarantee you it could have gotten pretty nasty.
Yeah, but listen, people, the three of us, yeah, we share a lot of common beliefs, but there is to different degrees. If you just want to sit around and listen to people who say the exact same things that you believe, your life's going to be boring. Come on, you got to diversify. Go out there and just push your boundaries. Just because somebody talks about something, it shouldn't trigger you. Come on, people.
All right. And from there, we've got a ton of email for different movie requests.
Well, the first comes from Joshua, and he says, "Hey, Shat Gang. It's Joshua from the brother commissioning trio of Adam, Josh, and John. The Crow, Forrest Gump, Bad Boys, Silence of the Lambs, all those movies. Anyway, I'm writing to see if I can request a commission. You see, I live in Highland Park, Illinois, and unless you've been living under a rock, yes, that Highland Park, Illinois. As our community has been struck with the recent tragedy of yet another mass shooting, I was hoping to commission a movie that was filmed in the area to bring some sort of awareness, a happy way, to this community that is steeped in 80s film history. Weird Science, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, etc. I think the only movie that I know was filmed here that you haven't done, and the one I'd request, is Uncle Buck. If possible, whenever the episode were to air, I'd like to include a link to one of the charities that is donating to the victims of the shooting, just in case it helps. Let me know if you're interested. Don't worry if accepted, my letter won't be political or anything like that. I don't even think I've seen Uncle Buck, but you know, it's for a good cause. As always, thanks for all you do, Joshua."
Well, Joshua, I'm a big fan of Uncle Buck. I saw it as a kid. I haven't seen it since. I think it's a perfect candidate. I don't know if it's already on the list, Big D. Are we scheduled to do it? Big D is shaking his head. No?
I don't believe so, but I will check now.
So if in fact it is not, I think that our schedule is really packed right now with doing TV and movies, but maybe either after Westworld, we could get something out there. What's up? No? It's not.
Uncle Buck has not been scheduled.
Cool. So it sounds like perhaps after we do Westworld, we could either do a special pod release, or if we don't manage to do that because of the packed schedule and everybody waiting for their movies, maybe the least we could do is like a Twitch component and donate that money to charity. I think that'd be a great idea.
I'd be on board for that.
Well, up next, we have a letter from Paul. And Paul says, "Hello, Shatheads. I live in Gainesville, Florida, and I stumbled on your podcast on Spotify and listened to Big D and Roger talk about Big and was instantly hooked. I'm 48, and you guys have brought back many memories from when I was growing up in Orlando, Florida. Actually, a popka. I went to boot camp in Fort Leonard Wood as a combat engineer and was sad.
Me too.
I went to boot camp in Fort Leonard Wood as a combat engineer and was sadly medically discharged during AIT for psoriasis. For a short time, I lived in Piqua, Ohio, so I immediately related to all of you gentlemen. I'm currently on Rounder, so I'm way behind, and unfortunately, I don't know Ash just yet. So the slurping is over. Thanks for all the memories you have rehashed. Just a suggestion for your list. Dark kids films. Never Ending Story, Secret of Nim, Watershed Down, etc. Your fellow Shathead, Paul."
I feel like it's that Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other. I'm like, Paul, that's me. Yes, I went to Fort Leonard Wood also. We're similar ages, but I think most likely you went to basic and AIT many years before me. I joined in 99. So you probably, I was older when I enlisted. But very cool. Yes. Combat engineer myself.
Also, The Secret of Nim, so fucking good.
Of those three, I've only seen Neverending Story.
The Secret of Nim is the best cartoon ever.
Well, guys, if you're out there listening, don't look at my tweets for ideas for things to commission. Instead, commission one of these movies: Neverending Story, Secret of Nim,
that one,
Watershed Down. Or it sounds like just Secret of Nim. Just do that one.
Secret of Nim. Well, up next, we have a letter from Martin who says, "Hi, guys. I love the pod. You do, and would love to commission a review sometime in 2024 based upon the excellent queue you've built up. The movie I like to commission is The Long Good Friday. Completed in 1979, according to Wikipedia, because of release delays, it is generally credited as an 80s film, so I hope it fits your criteria. If so, let me know, and I'll send the PayPal money over. Sorry, I hate Venmo because it needs access to my online bank account password, which is a hard no for me. Cheers, Martin."
Now I'm really worried about my Venmo account. Shit, Martin. Long Good Friday, again, another movie that I have not seen, and I'm fairly certain is not on the list. Big D, would you accept a 1979 movie that's credited as an 80s film if we do it in 2024?
Man, I mean, I'm just looking at the poster here. You got Bob Hoskins, he's kind of young. You got Helen Mirren, who's also young. It's a sketch of like a bridge, and there's it's like some gangster activity. Somebody's getting shot. It looks epic. I almost would have to say, hell yes. This looks like something we should do.
I'm into it. All right, Martin.
Yeah. Make it happen.
And Big D, do you accept PayPal?
Oh, I do. Yes, PayPal. Go to shatpod.com/support, and you will find the links there. But this movie looks interesting.
Well, and hopefully bringing good commission news to one final listener, we have Josh, who's written in requesting a film, and he says, "Hi, Shat team. I'm an East Coast transplant in the Midwest. I stumbled upon your podcast randomly because I had no clue what was going on in Westworld. For a long time, I've wanted to commission a movie that meant something very personal to me, whether it was a film I watched over and over as a kid or a film on repeat in college. No matter what day or night it was, I quickly learned I was late to the game. Being an idiot, despite the fact that I listened to all of your podcasts, I still search your webpage with an extreme amount of excitement just to be let down because you have covered as a team all the films I loved growing up. Goonies, License to Drive, Top Gun, Crocodile Dundee, War Games, etc. Despite this fact, long-winded, I miss my friends from growing up, and your team has allowed me to reminisce, smile, and bring me back to my roots because we argued over the same dumb stuff you do. Getting to my point, I'm not even that much of a Kevin Costner fan, but being a DC kid, I'd love to hear your take on a very underrated film from the 80s, No Way Out. As an aside, I haven't laughed as hard as I do hearing your team argue. I think in today's world, we could all take a page from the Shat book on just having a good time and agreeing it's okay to disagree. Josh. P.S. Gonna send you a Venmo now. So if you don't pick up the film, all good. Just love you guys.
100% No Way Out is great. Have either of you seen it?
No.
Oh, it is one of those. I think the entire movie basically takes place in the Pentagon. And not to spoil
Kevin Costner trying to get out?
No, it's let's just say he's in a predicament where he's trapped and he's trying to navigate. It's really good from what I remember, and it was one of the better Kevin Costner movies in the beginning.
All right, guys. Well, that's basically what we're doing for 2023. You just heard it. It's going to be No Way Out, The Secret of Nim, The Long Good Friday, and Uncle Buck. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Jane, next week we're heading back out west when prostitute Delilah is disfigured by a pair of cowboys in Big Whiskey, Wyoming. Her fellow brothel workers post a reward for their murder, much to the displeasure of the sheriff, Little Bill, who doesn't like or allow vigilantism in his town. Two groups of gunfighters, one led by the aging former bandit William Money, and the other by the florid English Bob, come to collect the reward. Clashing with each other over the sheriff, commissioned by Scott H., was released in 1992, won multiple Academy Awards, and features the song Claudia's Theme.
I did not know that.
Now you do.
Well, thank you to all the commissioners we have lined up, and thank you to Brian for commissioning The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the eighth dimension. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also on shatpod.com, you can use the SpeakPipe feature to leave us voicemail. We always love hearing from you, and it might appear on the podcast. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. You can find all that information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
Hey, boss! 2 more hogs got the fever.
Penny, why don't you help your brother out?
My guess is you're calling yourself Mr. William Money.
You have me confused with someone else, mister.
You're the one who killed William Harvey and robbed that train over Missouri.
We'll talk inside.
You don't look no cold-blooded damn killer.
Maybe I ain't.
I'm heading up north, gonna kill a couple of no-good cowboys.
For what?
For cutting up a lady, cut up her face, cut her eyes out, cut her ears off. How about it, Will?
2 of them cowboys, isn't there? Better there's 3 of us. Ned Logan, he's my partner.
We ain't bad men no more. We're farmers. How long's it been since you fired a gun at the man, Will? 9, 10 years?
11.
They're paying $1,000 to whatever son of a bitch kills the 2 boys that cut up Delilah.
Tell them there ain't no horse gold. Even if there was, or they wouldn't want to come looking for it.
With any luck, we'll find them by nightfall or in the morning. We can shoot them and head on back with the money.
Go, Davey!
Well, ain't you gonna shoot?
Shoot him down like to kill you. I'll see you in hell.